Hi, thank you for being here. This is the word demonstration is the culmination of the second phase of a creative studio practice, part of a long, wider study that I'm running here at LGMU, titled The Pretext for an Emerging Dramaturgy, in which I explore spontaneity in the interplay between a predetermined text and its performance. The creative practice elements of this study are two. One is an individual practice of writing for performance, in which I wonder whether there may be certain ways of writing, certain principles that may trigger spontaneity in the performance of a text. The other element, which is what we are here for today, is what I call dramaturgy, and is a collective practice of exploring ways of approaching text that may stimulate spontaneity. So I look at both sides of the writing divide. Yes, today I will do a brief introduction, trying to explain some of the principles behind our practice. Following which, the ensemble will demonstrate some of the training, vocal and physical training they have carried out so far, and also some of the performance material they have prepared. Yeah, I hope, so the performance material this is a word demonstration, also an open rehearsal if we like, but I hope you still get glimpses of the principles that I will try to explain in theory. I hope you will see them in practice as well, at least glimpses of them. So, in the context of this research, I define dramaturgy as the facilitation of a collective process of performance composition, one that is based on improvisation. Now, for me, there are two types of improvisation. One that is the improvisation that generates original material. The other improvisation is the improvisation that allows us to react spontaneously to a material that has already been generated. In this laboratory, we have worked on both. However, I think that the core of my research lays on the exploration of the nature of this second type of improvisation, that is our ability to react rather than to act. Here, spontaneity is considered our ability to react to an event in the moment it happens. The problem, of course, is if we have a text or any other structure, how can we react spontaneously to something that we know is going to happen? We have found that, generally speaking, what allows spontaneity is the conscious following of our impulses. Now, let me ask, what is impulse? Impulse could be defined, in my view, as the immediate, that is not a mediated, reaction to a stimulus, out of which personal associations can emerge. This is the important part of the whole thing. Personal associations are images or circumstances that justify the reaction to the performer. The manifestation of these associations is material, that is the expressivity of the actor on stage, and only that is shared with an audience, not necessarily the associations underlying the process. An impulse, therefore, is only a potential action, that is an action with only the seeds of an intention, not yet discovered, not yet motivated, not yet dramaturgically contextualized by the actor, and therefore not necessarily dramatic. So, how do we move from a movement, from a reactive movement or a reactive vocalization into an action? We need to add intention to it, of course. But now the problem is, when do we determine the intention? Is it before or after our reaction? If I suspect that the predetermination of an intention leads to the representation of a planned action, I propose instead a process of repetition, in which the contextualization of an impulse happens as much as possible through the associations emerging spontaneously from the repeated act. This process, which requires diligent training, may allow the recognition of an intention in or immediately after the act, as a sort of ongoing creative reflection. It is in this that lays for me what I call the dramaturgy of the actor. It is a process in which we plan the physical or vocal act, but not the intention of it. Repetition differs from representation in that there is no claim to reproduce an original aim. It's like an empty form. The basic element, what do we need to do this? I think centuries of training have kind of told us that is presence, the presence of the actor that allows us this. But how and what is presence? We think that presence is a type of listening, an awareness, an ability to pay attention to your whole physical and mental self as you do something, to be in the act as you are performing it, whatever act, even an imaginary act. What we looked for in our training is what can practically facilitate this type of presence, and therefore also this emergence of associations. We have found that the principle of continuity helps. For example, by continuity I mean a seamless flow of physical movements and vocal acts that attempts to rid itself of all unconscious poses. A flow in which the end of a gesture is already the beginning of the next. In this continuity, the actor needs to be totally immersed in what he's doing. She needs to be thinking with the body. Pauses between sections of movement, any distinction, any separation of ends from the following beginnings is a possible indication that the actor is planning ahead, predetermining what to do next, and in other words, no longer spontaneously reacting to the flow.
quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest.
What this morning, morning's minion, kingdoms of daylight go fly. Drawn, she's riding in steady air and starting by the he runs on the rainbow, twinkling wing in his ecstasy. Then off the hiding stone for bird. Mastery of the thing that roots
And that's it, right.
In the next exercises, we will try to demonstrate how we can train our ability to react to a stimulus through our voice or our body. And also, the stimulus itself can be vocal, physical, or mental. They can be internal or external to the performer. In the exercises, normally we work with external stimulus. And in this case, Jess will attempt to react with her voice to my stimulus. By using the voice, the speed of your voice, the volume, and the resonation. That is, her ability to place her voice in different parts of her body.
What if it be a poison which the friar subtly hath ministered to have me dead, lest in this marriage he should be dishonoured because he married me before to Romeo? I fear it is, and yet methinks it should not, for he hath still been tried a holy man. How if when I am laid into the tomb I wake before the time that Romeo come to redeem me? There's a fearful point. Shall I not then be stifled in the vault whose foul mouth there wells of air breathes in? And there die strangled in my Romeo comes, or if I live, is it not very like the horrible conceit of death, and night together with the terror of the place as in a vault, an ancient receptacle where for these many hundred years the bones of all my buried ancestors are packed, where bloody Tybalt Eabble green and earth lies festering in his shroud, whereas they say it's the house of the night spirits resort. Alack, is it not like that? I so early waking, what with loathsome smells and shrieks like mandrakes torn out of the earth, that living mortals hearing them run mad. Oh, if I wake, shall I not be distraught, environed with all these hideous fears, and madly play with my forefathers' joints? And in this rage, with some great kinsman's bone, as with a club, dash out my desperate brains. What if it be a poison which the friar suddenly had ministered to have me dead, lest in this marriage he should be dishonoured because he married me before to Romeo? I fear it is, and yet methinks it should not, for he hath still been tried a holy man. How if when I am laid into the tomb I wake before the time that Romeo come to redeem me? There's a fearful point. Shall I not then be stifled in the vault whose foul mouth no wholesome air breathes in? And there die strangled ere my Romeo comes, or if I live, is it not very like the horrible conceit of death, and night together with the terror of the place, as in a vault, an ancient receptacle where for these many hundred years the bones of all my buried ancestors are packed, where bloody Tybalt Yepple green and earth lies festering in his shroud, where, as they say, as some house of the night spirits resort? Alack, is it not like that? I so early waking, what with loathsome smells and shrieks like mandrakes torn out of the earth, that living mortals hearing them are mad. Oh, if I wake, these hideous fears, and madly play with my forefathers' joints. And in this rage, did some great kinsman's boners with a club dash out my desperate brains.
Now this we follow a group improvisation using the voice.
I'll be improvising with the same text I've just used, Juliet's monologue from Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare.
I'll be improvising with a text from Crave by Sarah Kane.
And I'll be improvising a Sheila Stevenson piece called Five Kinds of Silence.
And sit on your step smoking till your neighbour comes home. Sit on your step smoking till you come home. And worry when you're late. Be amazed when you're early. I'll give you some flowers and I'll go to your party and I'll dance till I'm black.
I can't sleep on my own, the bed's too big. There's footsteps in the stairs out in the corridor. I think it's him. Every time I think it's him. You say he's dead, but what if he's not?
What if it be a poison which the friar subtly hath ministered to have me dead, lest in this marriage he should be dishonoured?
And I'll say sorry when I'm wrong. And I'm happy when you forgive me.
The girl in the
Your
world's
photos, I
gone
wish I'd
now.
known
Euphoria, they said hysteria.
Because he married me before to Romeo.
Dear, but quick to go.
I fear it is, and yet methinks
Hear
it should
a
not
voice
be.
in my
Yet
ear.
still been tried a holy man. How if when I am laid into the tomb,
I feel your skin on my skin.
beside Romeo comes
Get scared when you're angry and your eye turns red and the other eye blue.
Has
Your
shriveled
hair's
him,
the left and your
Soon
face
he'll be
oriental.
gone. But he's back
There's
now
a
for the whole
fearful
of him.
point.
Tell you you're
His
gorgeous.
breath in my face, his hands in my hair, pulling me to places I want to forget.
Shall I
I'll
not
you
then
when
be
you're
stifled
anxious.
in the vault
I'll
whose
hold you
foul
when you're
mouth
hurt.
no wholesome air
And I'll
breathes
want you
in,
when
and
I
there
smell you,
down
and I'll
strangled
fend you
in
when
my
I touch
Romeo
you.
comes.
I'll whimper when I'm next to you and I'll whimper when I'm not. And I'll dribble on your breast and I'll smother you in the night. I'll get cold when you take the blanket and hot when you don't.
Is it not very
Not when you smile, not dissolve when you laugh.
with the terror of the
I don't
birds
understand
in
why
a
you think that
vault?
I'm
Strong
rejecting you.
like Susan, soon I will die of this.
I'm not rejecting
Close
you.
my eyes and I am trapped in the film of our life.
How you can think I'd ever reject you.
Another photo, snap.
I wonder who you are. I'll accept you
These
anyway.
900 years, the bones of all my buried ancestors are packed where bloody Tybalt, yet but green in earth, lies festering in his shroud.
Tell you about
Smile,
the tree
smile.
angel and chant
Close my eyes and I am trapped in the film of our life. Snap, another photo, snap.
Where
Now,
as
right
they
now,
say,
it's
come
nice
out of the
smile.
night,
I
currents
want to
resort,
write it,
alack, is it
And
not
I have
like
a feeling
that?
so
I
deep
so
inside I
only
can't find the words. I
breaking
want to buy you a
words
kitten I
is
get jealous of because it would get more attention than me.
Keep
Keep you in bed when you have to go. Cry like a baby
Our
when you
frocks and
finally
sandals,
do.
our arms entwined, a rabbit eating grass at our feet, and we are smiling.
Shrieks
Come
like
on,
spirits
Rachel.
Smiling,
the
smiling.
My
earth
present you don't
water
want
Smiling,
taken away again. I should marry me.
awake.
You say no again. Keep on asking because although you think I don't mean it, I do.
Shall I not be distraught in
Have from the
my
very
these
first time that I asked you.
years?
And I wander the city thinking it's empty without you, and I want what you want, and I feel like I'm losing myself, but I know that I'm safe when I'm with you. I tell you the worst,
Of my
and I'll
head,
try and
I
give you the best
say-
because that's all you deserve, and I'll answer your questions
I
when
am
I'd rather
sending you a
not, and I'll tell you the
message.
truth when I really don't want to, and I'll try to be honest because I know you prefer it.
Reading
And
me
I'm gonna
going
get
to
you
some great
to minutes
kinsman's
before you
stories
tell me
about
I'm
how
not
dash out my
It's not
desperate
true.
brains.
Can't you see it in my eye? He kicks us where it can't be seen, under our hair and under our clothes.
Because it's beautiful learning to know you and well worth the effort.
He
I'll
puts
speak
us
German
across
to
the
you
room.
badly. Hebrew to you worse.
I want to tear off my dress. and show
Somehow communicate
Look.
some of the overwhelming, undying,
I look at that photo and where is this sign in my eye?
overpowering, unconditional, all-encompassing, heart-enriching, mind-expanding, ongoing, never-ending love I
I look
have
at
for
that
you.
photo and we're just smiling.
In the next exercise, we will start to combine voice and movement in this action-reaction game. We will have two pairs of performers. One providing the stimulus through movement and the other reacting through voice, and the other couple the opposite. I hope I haven't messed it up. We call this speaker mover exercise, doesn't it?
The quality of mercy is not straight. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. Santa Maria, my God, have you actually ever thought about the underlying semantics of that? The Virgin Mary. You know how fucking poisonous the philosophy that lies at the heart of our entire culture is? And she was a virgin, and God fucked her or whatever. No, that's the perverse interpretation that God is a fucker. Please, God, hear me. I know you're not a fucker, no. God is all capable. His fingers, maybe that's the conception we always had to immaculate fucking oops. I've never even seen a dick. Here we go, let's give birth to the Son of God, which every woman essentially thinks that she has done hard work. I've never even heard of sex, and I'm already pregnant. I think I'm having a low blood sugar moment. Santa Maria, my God, have you actually ever thought about the underlying semantics of that? The Virgin Mary. You know how fucking...
Wenn Licht ins Dunkel sich verkehrt, die Luft gar kühl, doch unbeschwert, die schwarze Erde sanft berührt. Und Zeit, ein Duft vibriert, wenn blasse Schleier klaren Taus im Nebel zart erklingen, so breiten Tröpfchen Silberschwingen im Dunkel unserer Welt aus.
Santa Maria, my God.
Im fahlen Licht des Mondes fern verliert sich gar der Hauch der Zeit. Im Nichts des Schattens strahlt ein Stern, ein Mensch entflieht der Tage Herr. Hinaus! In die Unendlichkeit!
Poison! Philosophy, the life of one bird, I could read into the Virgin, God walked away, whatever, no,
Die schwarze Erde sanft berührt und Zeit ein Luft vibriert. Ein blasse Schleier klaren Taus. Im Nebel zart erklingen, so breiten Tröpfchen Silberschwingen im Dunkel unserer Welt aus. Im fahlen Licht des Mondes fern verliert sich gar der Hauch der Zeit. Nichts des Schattens strahlt ein Stern, ein Mensch entflieht der Tage Herr, und durch das hinausfließt die Unendlichkeit.
Blessed him that gives, and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. Die schwarze Scepter shows the force of power.
Ein Duft vibriert, wenn
Blasse Schleier, where sit the dread and fear of kings.
so breiten Tröpfchen Silberschwingen im Dunkel unserer Wälder aus. Im fahlen Licht des Mondes fern verliert sich gar der Hauch der Zeit. Im Nichts des Schattens strahlt ein Stern, ein Mensch entflieht der Tage Herr. Hinweg, hinaus, in die Unendlichkeit.
The training on this ability to engage with presence and continuity in a physical or speech act and to react spontaneously to a stimulus is naturally followed by the work on associations. This work is aimed at transforming a spontaneous impulsive reaction into an action for which the actor has a clear association, which justifies that action to him or herself. The problem with working with text as our stimulus is that the text has already meaning embedded in the form, which may lead the reaction to a mere illustration or representation of a presupposed intention. The work we are doing here on physical actions may allow us to bypass this problem by developing a movement sequence out of the actor's personal and impulsive responses to the text. Out of the mere speaking of it, for example, reacting to the syntax, the rhythm, or evocative images, words, verbs, particular, present in the text. We then separate the text from its resulting physical score so as to allow the actor to develop new associations through the repetition of the physical form alone. Only after the actor has mastered the detailed repetition of the new sequence of physical actions, which by this point might be significantly different from the original version, we place the text back on top of the movement, allowing new discoveries and associations to emerge, as the speech reacts to movement rather than illustrating the text. The main challenge for the performer here at this point is to be able to retain a seamless fluidity of movement and speech while synchronizing the two separate scores together into one. The next demonstration will present the three different scores, the textual, the physical, and their montage. The following actor will perform directly the final version of their scene.
I'll be working with The Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His sceptre shows the force of temporal power, an attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. And earthly power doth then show likest gods when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. I have said thus much to mitigate the justice of thy plea, which if thou follows this strict court of Venice, must needs give sentence against the merchant there. Quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His sceptre shows the force of temporal power, an attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. And earthly power doth then show like as gods when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea. Consider this, that in the course of justice none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. I have said thus much to mitigate the justice of thy plea, which if thou follows this strict court of Venice, must needs give sentence against the merchant there.
I've been working with 2 poems, one a German poem that I wrote some years ago myself, and the other a Polish poem by the poet Wisława Szymborska entitled A Stone, translator unknown.
Wenn Licht ins Dunkel sich verkehrt, die Luft gar kühl, doch unbeschwert die schwarze Erde sanft berührt und Zeit um Zeit ein Duft vibriert, wenn blasse Schleier klaren Taus im Nebel zart erklingen. So breiten Tröpfchen Silber schwingen im Dunkel unserer Wälder aus. Im fahlen Licht des Mondes fern verliert sich gar der Hauch der Zeit. Im Nichts des Schattens strahlt ein Stern, ein Männchen fliegt da. Geh weg, hinaus. I've little time to do so, my mortality should move you. Go away, says the stone, I do not have the muscles to smile. I knock on the stone's door, it's me, let me in. I hear your great empty halls inside of you, unseen in their beauty. Admit you don't know them well yourself. Great and empty, true enough, says the stone, but there isn't any room. Beautiful, perhaps, but not to the taste of your poor senses. You may get to know me, but you never know me through. All my surface is turned toward you, my inside turned away. Let me in. Do not seek refuge for eternity. I'm not unhappy. I'm not homeless. My world deserves my return. I shall enter and exit empty-handed. And as proof that I've been there, I'll take with me only words that no one will believe. You shall not enter, says the stone. You lack the sense of participation. You have nothing but its sea. Imagination. Knock on the stone's door. It's me. Let me. I don't have 2,000 centuries to get under your roof. If you don't believe me, says the stone, ask the leaf, and it will tell you the same. Ask a drop of water and it will tell you what the leaf said. Ask a hair on your head. I knock on the stone's door. It's me. Let me in. I have no says the stone.
Thank you. We end this word demonstration with a scene, open rehearsal we can call it, of a scene extract from a text that I have written and that is part of the research. Following which, we have a couple of minutes break, and then whoever wants to stay for a Q&A is welcome. Thank you.
I like your English.
That's the kind of phrase she'd use.
What kind of phrase?
That's the kind of phrase that woman would use. Doesn't matter that or another, but those crackling eyes. And that smile, for example.
Pretty innocent. Pretty innocent example.
That's how to conceive an option. That's how it sneaks in, and...
And a stream of light lights the corner of his mind, and a knife is there.
A knife is there.
Laying.
Right in the corners.
Corners. That's right. To go and seize it. The knife. To pick it up. To hold it. To feel very attractive. To have a lot of blood already spreading on the scene and to sense. To foresee he could have been more precautious.
The way she lays over the puddle. The red puddle. Her white dress. All soaked wet and quickly clotted. And the taint of this angst, this hollow angst, will not dissolve from the pit of his gut.
To look at her dress in distress, the way she attempts to undress, but underneath that white dress reveals many a same dress, increasingly stained red, and a silence that screams.
I couldn't mark the act.
He can never mark the act after it happens.
Nor can he prevent
Then
it.
he tries to ignore it, doesn't he? Tries to forget.
Looks the other way.
How can you forget what you don't want to remember? How can you forget what you don't want to remember? How can you forget what you don't want to remember?
It's easily done. You just pick anyone and
and
pretend that you never have met.
But forsaking is never that easy. Or forgetting. Forgiving. What does he mean to say? He feels helpless, never quite accepting the reasons of his actions while suffering the consequences of their necessity.
I do not know how to love you. Yet the will to love is stronger than the will I have to live.
That's what he thinks sometimes.
That's what he thinks every time he tries, every time he fails. I love you, but I'm not in love with you.
And he doesn't understand that really, in English, as said by a girl he liked who eventually left him,
Terrible, terrible incomprehension.
was little more than a boy then, and still is.
Not many girls have left him, though, since then.
Not many, no.
How many?
1 or 2.
1 or 2.
Out of.
How many?
How many has he had?
How does that make him feel?
Is it better to leave or to be left?
He doesn't really know, does he?
Depends, doesn't it?
On what, though?
Go away! Go away from me!
Me? Now look at his face, his countenance. He's so handsome, so unsure. How come he doesn't find someone? Such unexpressed potential, such unexpressed enthusiasm. It cannot even be said to be one. Want to come to my place? Here, initiative. Deep down, this is what he'd like, isn't it? He'd like to talk a bit first, doesn't he? He needs to let himself go. Cannot be tedious now, can he, now that she... Who could she be? Who likes his English? Who smells of kindness and disenchantment? Who takes his hand? Yes, takes his hand and presses it gently against hair. Hair. As if shape through his hand, and so he takes off her shirt. That's it, I'm poetic. Lips rambling the back of her neck. Fingers picking the back of her bra. But you cannot unfasten it, no. You cannot unfasten it. So she says, make love to me, she says. Billowing, she says. Sweep death away, she says. To the void that he fears. As he feels his feelings failing him. Fears his feelings failing him.
It's in the intimacy of love. In the immersive intimacy of love that a seed of pain is planted, inadvertently planted. Lovers thrust their love against their loved ones and take turns. Yes, they take turns with pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain.
The way she clenches the knife that he dropped, the knife that inadvertently was tossed, must have ended up, inadvertently ended up underneath their bed. She steps back. The way she stares at them. How would that make you feel?
I do not know how to love you, and the will to love is stronger than the will I have to live.
But it's more...
Complicated?
It's more complicated.
Van.
That, the end, there's nowhere to dump it.
Unless they pretended.
It smells the end at every beginning.
Unless he pretends.
Leave unless alone.
Unless alone, always already alone.
But it's not really regret, is it? Feels more like disappointment, really. Constant disappointment.
There's a bit of regret, a sparkle of it. A bit of regret for something unknown. Some single choice, the other choice not chosen or not even given.
That's the impossibility that he feels. The intimacy is the prospect, the impossibility of the prospect of both, not just both, just wanting just both, but choice. Will to have choice must be impossible. Choice won't overcome choice. To get dressed. To light a cigarette. As she drifts away.
As she does. I'm innocent, really. I'm a blonde, innocent, intelligent, beautiful, pretty little girl. My scent is fresh. I'm a little white rose with fair little drops of fair little dew. What has become, what has of you? Yet I sweat.
What was it? What was it that he felt? That he felt when he was younger and smelled while unaware?
Might be less romantic than taking stock on a rocking chair on a squeaking porch of a summer night in a cotton dress with a flower in her hair and that sweat down her neck, and he wants that feeling back and a cigarette to sketch with fading smoke drawn in the air what he fails to feel, what lures him there.
Plus he prefers dark hair.
Shapes come out of a void, of a
Past of a now that's always been now but never quite now.
Some kind of background noise.
Harmonious sounds like silent sounds, and everything still get restless.
Then there's a shock and a shudder, and suddenly you think one way or another, but it's just a question of will, no more chance.
Then you kind of warm up again, don't you? You kind of get used, grow habits as if your will was up to you.
But it's hard as you get to be here, as you get to be aware of the void that you don't know, that these lights have swallowed up, digested and excreted in you.
Human was long walks.
Hand in hand.
Days were never long enough.
Evenings never too cold for
Lengthy farewells.
Mum calling him home.
You catch something?
He catch the flu.
kiss.
And that lady saying, that lady seeing them coming or going, that lady saying,
You're a nice couple, you.
How could you?
how could he?
I like your English.
That's the kind of phrase she'd use.
What kind of phrase?
That's the kind of phrase that woman would use. Doesn't matter that or another, but those crackling eyes and that smile, for example.
Pretty innocent? Pretty innocent example.
That's how to conceive an option. That's how it sneaks in, and...
And a stream of light lights the corner of his mind, and a knife is there.
A knife is there,
Lurking.
brightening the corners.
The corners, that's right.
To go and seize it, the knife, to pick it up, to hold it, to feel very attractive, to have a lot of blood already spreading on the scene, and to sense, to foresee he could have been more precautious.
The way she lays down over the puddle, the red puddle, her white dress all soaked wet and quickly clotted, and the taint of this angst, this hollow angst, will not dissolve from the pit of his gut.
To look at her dress in distress, the way she attempts to undress, but underneath her white dress reveals many a same dress, increasingly stained red, and the silence that screams.
I couldn't mark the act.
He can never mark the act as it happens.
Nor can he prevent it.
Then he tries to ignore it, doesn't he? He tries to forget it.
Looks the other way.
But how can you forget what you don't want to remember? How can you forget what you don't want to remember? How can you forget what you don't want to remember?
It's easily done, you just pick anyone and pretend that you never have been.
Forsaking is never that easy. Or forgetting. Forgiving. What does he mean to say? He feels helpless. Never quite accepting the reasons of his actions while suffering the consequences of their necessity.
I do not know how to love you, yet the will I have to love is stronger than the will I have to live.
That's what he thinks sometimes.
That's what he thinks every time he tries.
Every time he fails.
I love you, but I'm not in love with you.
And he doesn't understand that really in English, as said by a girl he liked, who eventually left him.
Terrible, terrible incomprehension.
Was little more than a boy then, still is.
Not many girls have left him though since then.
Not many now.
How many?
One or two.
One or two.
Out of?
How many?
How many has he had?
How many?
How did he feel about that?
Is it better to leave or to be left?
He doesn't know, does he?
Depends, doesn't it?
On what though? Go away. Go away from me. Me. Now look at this face, at this countenance. So handsome, so unsure. How come he doesn't find someone? Such unexpressed potential, such unexpressed enthusiasm cannot even be said to be one. Want to come to my place? Her initiative, deep down, this is what he'd like, isn't it? He'd like to talk a bit first. Doesn't he needs to let himself go? Might be tedious, can he now that she, who could she be? Likes his English and smells of kindness and disenchantment, and takes his hand, yes, takes his hand, and presses it. Gently presses it against her. As if to sense her shape through his hand, and so he takes off her shirt. That's it, unpoetic lips rambling her neck, fingers picking the back of her bra. But he cannot unfasten it. No, he cannot unfasten it. So she says, make love to me. She says, billowing. Sweep death away, she says. To the void To the void he fears as he feels his feelings failing him, as he fears his feelings failing him.
To the intimacy of love, in the immersive intimacy of love, that a seed of pain is planted, inadvertently planted. Lovers trust their love against their loved ones and take turns, yes, they take turns with pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain.
The way she clenches the knife that he dropped, the knife that inadvertently was tossed, was and ended up, must have ended up, inadvertently ended up underneath their bed. She steps back. The way she stares at them, how would that make you feel?
I do not know how to love you, and the will to love is stronger than the will I have to live.
But it's more
Complicated.
It's more complicated. That the end, there's nowhere to dump it.
Unless they pretended.
He smells the end at every beginning.
Unless he pretends.
Leave unless alone.
Unless alone. Always alone. Always already alone. It's not really regret, is it? It feels more like disappointment, really, constant disappointment.
There is a bit of regret, a sparkle of it, a bit of regret for something unknown. Some alternative, that single choice, the other choice, not chosen or not even given.
That's the impossibility he feels. The intimacy is the prospect, the impossibility of the prospect of both, but not just both, just wanting just both, but choice, just will to have choice, must be impossible. Choice won't overcome choice. To get dressed, to light a cigarette as she drifts away.
As she does.
I'm innocent, really. I'm a blonde, innocent, intelligent, beautiful, pretty little girl. My scent is fresh. I'm a little white rose with fair little drops of fair little dew. What has become? What has of you?
Yet I sweat.
What was it? What was it that he felt when he was younger and smelled while unaware?
I'd be less romantic than taking stock on a rocking chair, on a squeaking porch of a summer night, in a cotton dress with a flower in her hair and sweat down her neck, and he wants that feeling back. And a cigarette to sketch with fading smoke drawn in the air, what he fails to feel, what lures him.
Plus he prefers dark hair.
Shapes come out of a void, of a
Past of a now that's always been now and never quite now.
Some kind of background noise.
harmonious sounds, like silent sounds, and everything's still yet restless.
Then it's a shock and a shudder, and suddenly you think one way or another, but it's just a question of will, no more chance.
And you kind of warm up again, don't you? Kind of get used. Grow habits as if your will was up to you.
But it's hard as you get to be here, as you get to be aware of the void that you don't know, that these lights have swallowed up, digested and excreted in
He remembers
you.
long walks.
Hand in hand.
Days are never long enough.
Evenings, never too cold for...
Lengthy farewells.
I'm calling him home.
You'll catch something.
Catch the flu.
And she would pay him a visit, and she would not restrain her kiss.
And that lady saying, that lady seeing, them coming and going, that lady saying...
You're a nice couple, you.
How could you?
How could he?
Well done, by the way. It was a very, very nice experience. And I guess I wanted to sort of ask the participants, in general terms, how it was for you, but my specific question really was, it seemed to me there's a kind of aesthetic emerging in terms of a certain rhythm, which I would describe as quite taut, kind of taut energy to that, and almost symbolist in its quality. I just wondered if that's something that you were conscious of as performers, where you think that came from. I was imagining you, as you do in this context, we kind of all know that, becoming a bit of a kind of organism as a collective kind of thing. Is that? I just wondered if you could talk about that, and if you understand what, or that resonates with your experience or not. I don't know, in terms of what I'm perceiving to be a kind of ensemble aesthetic going on.
Yeah, the symbolism that you talked about, that definitely comes from association. So what was happening in the rehearsal was we would work on things, and then things would come from the subconscious that would just automatically piece everything together very beautifully that you wouldn't plan. So that I think that's what you're talking about, where that comes from, something that you're unconscious of, but because you're in a full state of presence, that allows that to come through, which Filippo trained us to do.
But there is also, I don't think there is a style involved, because I think that is the performer coming with a certain association. We have had in the tester workshops many participants, and I've been testing this with some people. And a lot of times there was also a very naturalistic score.
Yeah. I think today, I mean, it might just be
today,
me,
yes, probably also my...
Yeah, there's a certain kind of energy which is common, I think, to people. Yeah, they've got individual styles and there's different things going on in different exercises, but there was this kind of, it felt like a symbolist play, and it felt like this taut energy that was kind of going on. I just wondered.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think that I think through working with the text, which is, you know, fairly neurotic, well, completely neurotic, like it feels like, you know, that when you start to create physical positions from that, it's in response to that. So I think probably the next challenge is also to go back into the physical score of the piece and fill it with other energies, and to counter that, or to see how that works. Because I think that it can, I think creating those physical positions from the text can lead to that sort of rigidity and tension, because that's within the text itself. Well, that's where the text led me anyway.
Because both your verbally it was very much a different rhythm at play, whereas physically it was almost exact in that sense, which the experience for me was it left me feeling quite cold, and not necessarily for me, there was no emotional connection at all, which may be what you're exploring, but that's kind of was my experience, where vocally it was very interesting where you were playing with rhythms, but it wasn't necessarily matched with the body. It was very linear and very taut, which has a very particular tone, which I think is where James is sort of saying it was kind of amongst everyone, which is not necessarily, that's not a criticism. I just wonder if there's something that you could kind of play with. And it comes, and I use that word play in terms of spontaneity, where kind of reaction to picking out words and text, but have you explored in terms of the idea of naivety and playing with that idea, because children play in a very spontaneous way?
On that, I should say that we haven't carried out the complete work because it ended up being rehearsed in a fairly, not convention, but we couldn't do the scoring of physical actions on the scene. And therefore we never worked on the idea of the score for the action, for the actor individually. You know, and therefore, and then individual, and then put together. And then put together is you play with tempo, you play with much more than, well, I mean, it's very complicated.
Yeah, and just picking up on what you said about maybe lacking sight emotion or connection to emotion, I think because of the amount, well, the work that we've been doing, which is playing around with the text and playing around with the physicalities and vocalities of text, you sort of, the emotion comes much later because you're still initially in this working out period of what can be done, what you get from it, your associations with it, and because that changes so much when you first start working with the text, it feels like the emotion might not necessarily come straight.
But that was my experience and reflection of what I witnessed. So there may be that's why I asked: is there other ways of kind of then being able to develop that? Because as it was very interesting in terms of listening to the voice and watching the body, but they were kind of disconnected, which I guess is something that was the thing that I found interesting. Whereas I didn't necessarily get an emotional connection to the text in any way, shape or form, which might be the purpose of it, but that was my experience to find that.
It felt a little bit more technical to begin
Yes.
with, so it's the working with the score and then the working with the voice, and then putting the two together and kind of avoiding or falling into the immediate emotion that presents itself, which is the, you know, maybe stereotyped emotion that might come up first thing, first choice, but to sort of almost avoid that and to stay true to the technicality or the score, the physicality of the score, and to kind of feel that and how the voice can ride on top of that, and then emotion might come from there. That's how I've understood the process. And I feel like, you know, we could have a few more months, years.
The question is it possible for a whole play? You know, because the score, the little monologues they have done, and of course there is a lot. They just matched the voice on top of the movement on the monologues, and that took weeks. So can we do that for a play? Is a problem.
I think with the workshops, like what helped me was with having the score, you can always go back to that. So you've always got some kind of control over where the text might take you, you know. So, and also as an actor, you get to understand that actually in some places you might be blocked as well. So like with the working with the voice and the resonating and stuff like this, taking away any association to begin with and just focusing on the technicalities of it can help, because it's just, you know, you're looking outside of that, and then you're working about where your voice can take you, where your body can take you, and then from that it can almost like release something, or you feel something and do you want to go there or don't want to go there, and it's all that. That's how I found it anyway, and I do find having the score, the background helps.
Could you and Jess and Sophie talk about that trio exercise you did with Romeo and Juliet? Sorry. I've written one thing. And Sarah Kane and 5 Kinds of Silence. Yeah.
5 Kinds of Silence.
Could you? I mean, I know this isn't a workshop; it's a demonstration. But as a demonstration, I really enjoyed that exercise. I really enjoyed the sort of experience of those 3 texts colliding, but also actually dovetailing in really quite interesting ways. How did that come about?
Well, we've actually not worked on that.
Not much. No. It's just a basic, that's the initial listening to each other. Yeah. Picking up on, when we work on resonators, we'll start to work on resonators, and then we'll be guided through, like Filippo did with my first exercise, and then we'll begin to work with each other, and it's the simple thing of listening to each other. Not the text necessarily, that just happens by lovely coincidence sometimes, that the text falls nicely in places. But the actual listening to each other and the vocal range and where they're at, and sort of picking up on that and taking it somewhere else and making sure that they follow. I think that's how you get that exercise, is just true listening to the other people doing the exercise.
And then you feel like when you can...
And following your impulse.
Yeah, you feel like when you can speak, and like when you think, oh yeah, this feels like, I feel like my body makes me say it, do you know what I mean? So like you start overlapping
and sometimes it works better than others.
Yeah.
Well, ain't that the way?
But yeah, I think it's really nice when you actually truly get to listen to each other. I think it's a thing of being comfortable with the performers that you're working with, and the fact that you like, when we first started to do the exercise, I think we were a bit scared of overlaying two texts over the top of each other, so it was almost like a, you talk then I'll talk, then you talk then I talk. But as you get to just be used and be like, no, this can work, and obviously the more you do it, repetition, that combines with listening.
So what happens in that process? I'm really interested. Are you also listening to the other people's monologues?
Oh yeah, completely, yeah.
And how much is that on the level of cognition? Because I can see how you're talking about kind of physical and sort of oral response.
It's more the tone of it for me, like the tone of like, she's you know, she's like, I can't sleep, Mum, I can't sleep. I am her mum.
Yeah, there's parts of it like when you're very invested in what the other people are saying, but you pick up on bits of their text. It's not like you're fully listening to theirs, and theirs, as a human you can't listen to two things at once. Well, you can to a certain extent, but it's just picking up on each other, listening.
I think tone is a really interesting word actually, because it's something we could talk about later, just because it's often spoken about as a property of a text which isn't located in the author, it's not located in the narrator, and it's not even located in the reader, it's just somewhere else. And it is something that we respond to, even if we can't locate it.
I'm just interested in two things, amongst others. One is that influences haven't been mentioned at all. Influences.
References.
Your
Yes,
influences.
yes.
Who are you mainly drawing from?
Okay, so a lot of the exercises are basically Grotowski modern theatre Eugenio Barba. This is mainly, and then viewpoints, Mesner also.
With Grotowski, would you, because you used the term physical actions many times, are you talking about Grotowski's work on Stanislavski's idea of...
Yeah, but yes, I don't claim to do anything like that. I just take inspiration.
I wasn't
from
suggesting that you...
No, I know. I just take inspiration because this problem of can we react to text continuously at the end of the day? It involves thinking and how can we do? So I think that already Stanislavski discovered this possibility of just worry about pick up the cup and do 3 steps, and then pick up the cup and do 3
I see what happens. Yeah, absolutely.
Then
Well,
of course,
speaking as somebody who's spent more than a year doing one production twice a day, it's a problem.
And it's a problem, and I think that the dislocation of text from movement and then putting back together and mess about and then work with the associations of the movement separate from the association of the text, then the movement becomes his own scene. And then you put the text on top, and the text acquires, even if the movement is naturalistically illustrating the text, is different. It's different. It feels totally different.
Yeah, thank you. And my other thing is, well, two parts. How much laughter was there in these workshops?
I'm biased.
How much laughter was there? So, very little. Very little. Interesting. So, part B, how well do these techniques lend themselves to comedy?
That would be interesting.
every time I watch your thing, though, I always laugh at your things. So.
Yeah, I do find that there's parts where I do want to. There's some bits in Charles that went very attractive. That I laughed at. I laughed.
And in an hour, I don't think anybody laughed at anything.
No.
There was a sense of this is too serious to laugh at. And actually, I wonder. I've known rehearsals where, and I know this is completely different, but I've known rehearsals of productions where people say this is so serious. There's no laughter, it's too serious. And then actually people go to the pub and somebody drops a fork and everybody falls about for hours because it's so funny. Because there has to be a release. The rehearsal, I remember I was 18 years old, I think. I was at Matthew Bolton Technical College in Birmingham, and we did, directed by a member of the staff, we did a rehearsed reading of The Investigation by Peter Weiss, and it's a transcript of the Frankfurt War trials concerning Auschwitz. It is horrific. The material is horrific. And it's the rehearsals in which I remember we did like 4 weeks, 5 weeks rehearsals, and it's the rehearsals in which I remember the most laughter. Not about the material, of course, obviously, but somebody would drop their script and we would fall about laughing. It's interesting just to ponder on laughter and the playing of comedy, I don't know.
I think the Grotowski reference, it struck me instantly. I did a lot of Grotowski work when I was much younger. And I found it, I know it's interesting to hear you talk about kind of evolving the physical score, but doing the discipline of both the vocal and physical repetition, what you would call the plastique, the notion of doing that over and over, which frees up the psychophysical connection. And I think it's a very holistic way of looking at the potential for actor training, which I still think is quite a European mode in a way, that in this country we're still, in most of the conservatoire sector where actor training goes on, we're still pretty far behind in looking at actor training in that larger context. And I think this work is incredibly valuable from that perspective. I mean, it is intense, and when you experience it as a performer, there is a great intensity to it. And why, in a way, it's also incredibly rewarding, and why sometimes it feels a little bit, as it did with Grotowski, you know, it was almost religious, the devotion to his way of working, and actors immersing themselves in the lab, in his theatre lab. But on the other hand, I take Mike's point absolutely, and the idea of spontaneity within the work is a real key question, that only through the constant repetition and constant technical mastery do we get to the place where we are then free enough to do it. Which in a funny way is a bit like comedy. The inverse side is that in comedy there are techniques of playing comedy that are so kind of sort of understood and they're about timing and rhythm and technical issues and business and all of that physicality, that at the same time, when we get those things right in relation to text, then it opens up, and it's like surfing the wave. You feel like you can just cruise that roll of laughter. I did laugh internally. There's all some very, very funny things in there, but that's because I'm silent person.
No, but so did I.
Yes, but there you are.
The atmosphere was such that it would have appeared, possibly, arguably.
There is a lot of...
I think that's maybe a fault of us then, for making it seem that intense when it's...
No, I think if I may, not as a way of defending myself, I think there is something about working with personal material that creates this, because there is some, I don't know, for me sometimes there is something about my spontaneity needs to come from you, and there is this kind of level of respect that and care, also I think possible vulnerability when you do the improvisations, you know, a lot of improvisations. I don't know how you felt, but my first preoccupation was to create a safe environment. And we get to know each other, no, through the work. But at the beginning, you don't know. People can, it's very. I think this is what creates very simply.
I think it was very evident, that level of connection and evolved ensemble that you created. And I think it's admirable. I think that's
I agree, and I've already said that to the company.
Yeah, because in the end, that's the thing, and that's partly why we at this point we're still not quite being given permission to laugh, because it does feel like we're laughing in church. It feels like we're intruding on something that's very personal and very special for you.
Yeah.
And bit by bit, the way we broker that relationship, or whether we want to make capital of it, because we can make theatrical capital of that too. But it's then about being conscious of it, and I think it's right. It emerges from the group. Will vary according to that who the members of the ensemble are.
It's interesting where people's eye line was.
Yeah.
People didn't look at us.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a conscious thing, because there wasn't a connection necessarily. Maybe that's part of it.
Direct connection to the audience.
So there wasn't a direct eye contact at all.
Do you mean through the scenes or just in general?
No,
That
throughout.
was something I was unsure
With
of,
us,
where I could.
I think Anita.
Sometimes,
But she does it in
but
a
I
very
held back.
subtle,
Yeah, she
in a
did.
very subtle way.
That's like Stanislavski, isn't it?
But I held back
Quite
as well,
Stanislavski.
because I
The
felt like.
concentration doesn't belong out here.
What did you say then, Mike?
I just said that because what Mark was saying was that your eye line was never on us. And I was saying, well, actually, that's very Stanislavski, who said your concentration does not belong. I mean, obviously, this has been superseded, but nevertheless, your concentration does not belong in the auditorium.
I think this was quite a weird thing for me starting these workshops, because I've always performed and I like eye contact with an audience. I like having a shared moment with a member of the audience. And through this training, but I've started to take a lot more time to look internally, which was strange for me, the contrast between it. And I've learned a lot from it. And it is work with associations, because that is what's making me look internally. So getting those associations was really nice for me as a performer who is used to concentrating a little bit too much on that eye contact. So it's weird knowing where you should place them, because you want to do both of those things. You do want to have that connection, but you also do want to have those internal moments with yourself.
But ultimately, it's a relationship with the audience, so you choose one or the other.
Yeah, I suppose it depends, because in this context, you're training in you haven't really got an audience. You're just opening up a closed room.
Yeah.
So, depending on what context you do your training under, so quite often I do it as if there's an audience. Keep remembering, but other types of training, it's not, and then you decide when you're ready, or it shifts. I don't know. I guess that's something. Because also, a lot of training then doesn't work when.
Yes, when you said you put the audience in
Yeah,
front.
so I think that's quite interesting, but also why I'm presuming that element was not there. You were just opening a door to a part of a process.
Yeah.
Did it feel different to you, having us here?
No.
Yeah.
I think a little bit more nerves.
In the training.
There's something about having an audience that makes you, because you're being listened to, it makes you listen to yourself as well. I find that anyway. And sometimes that can trip you up. You become too self-conscious. But it does add that extra sense of listening to yourself. And actually, the eye contact thing is really interesting. It struck me throughout the process. And I think that we've spent a lot of time listening to our own voices and attempting to listen to ourselves as an ensemble, that it does lead to blind eyes, like not blind eyes, but non-focused eyes, because you're opening up this as much as possible. So it does trap you in some way, and I have found myself wanting less and less to talk to someone directly or have a target. The target is often also to do with the text as well. Very abstract. It's the ideas of being a thought or being an idea.
Yeah.
So then, where do you look? Right.
I do you know what I've just found with the audience, which I'm going to think will reflect more on this. You know, sometimes without this training and these techniques, when an audience comes in, sometimes my performance can change so radically because of the audience, and it will take me to a heightened level where I've never been before. But what I found with this was, because the techniques were so in place, I was able to use that as my concentration, and that kept me really, really stable and really, really maybe go deeper into what I was doing, and that there's my boundaries there, I stay there, and then there's just some people here who are watching, which that was very, very interesting. So I don't know if that made the performance better or not.
If I can corroborate that, but one thing I didn't feel like an audience. I didn't want to be an audience. I wanted to be a witness to an experiment, and I thought I really was. So I didn't want comedy. I didn't want you to look into my eyes either.
And I wasn't suggesting that we did.
No, but you know, in that sense, I thought it was more successful, and I like the idea that, you know, however you call it, blind eyes or unfocused. I thought that was absolutely appropriate, and it seemed to mark the success of the method.
There is a problem of tendency of spacing out. Because, of course, is concentration, and then his ability to it's a form of meditation in which we need to meditate, but openly. It's an active meditation. The problem is it becomes sometimes closed meditation. So it's training.
It's really hard to. To me, it feels like an undulation. It feels like sometimes the awareness is wide open and I'm taking in the ensemble, and then at other times it narrows down, then it internalizes, there's an inner process, something's been triggered, an association. Then I'm realizing I'm no longer present with everybody else, and so I'm placing awareness out there. So it feels like this fluidity of awareness and constantly working to do the impossible, be present with people in the ensemble and present with myself and all the things that are going on. And add the audience on top, and then the whole thing becomes heated up. Feels like you're in some kind of crucible, and the Bunsen burner has been turned up, and you're cooking away basically. But yeah, the awareness it shifts all the time, and sometimes it's more narrow, and sometimes it's very wide and open. And then at the best of times, there comes this moment. It feels like almost like a moment of grace, where you're floating on top of the score, and you're aware of the ensemble, and something is happening between you. It's a kind of relational process then, and then it feels really powerful then. Yeah.
How is it working with known texts and your text? In terms of, I suppose, what I'm trying to say is something that has a sort of weight of reproductions and history.
You mean all text or the scene? Or
Do you mean all texts?
Yeah,
in general.
Text,
Yeah.
Or I guess yours, which is new to them, new
Yeah.
to all of us.
I completely don't think about that. I don't think about it being redone. I think about every text that I use as a new text. Because I think if I don't, I'm going to imitate.
But how do you think that? I suppose is my question.
How
do you get to that?
It all started with speaking the text monotone, mono rhythm, and without pauses. So this idea of continuity is in the vocal act too.
Yeah.
So pam 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 pam. So what you need is complete knowledge of the text.
Yeah, you know.
They learned all the lines. For example, the text had no allocated lines. So we came up with this through improvisation. However, then you fix it, the improvisation, but then you don't have time to repeat it. So you block it, and it becomes halfway through. But the text was learned monotone the first time. We just went to, I like your English, that's the kind of phrase she used, what kind of phrase, that's the kind of phrase the woman would use, blah, 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 blah. Very incredibly boring. Just to dislocate any potential meaning, intention.
That's hard. That's really hard, because monotone can be a lot of different things. The way that you did monotone is probably differently to the way that someone else would do. It's come back to what I was saying before. That's Andrew Sherlock always says, doing nothing is impossible. Well, he's right.
Yeah, I guess it's more a dislocation.
It's about
It's
just
always
It's
dislocating.
plain, isn't it? It hasn't got like any like intention. It's just like flat.
taking away pauses.
Yeah.
Taking away the pauses
Like
was the main thing
consonants.
for me. So with the Juliet text, I'd done the Juliet text a few times before, and going back to it and speaking it purely monotone without the pauses that I'd created before in my own interpretation of it, getting rid of that was difficult, but it's just, as I found with most things in this workshop, case of repetition. Repeat until it's you don't have to think anymore, it comes out, and it learning it in monotone with no pauses, no gaps, nothing. It's like a blank canvas, and then from there you begin to add. And every time you do it, it might change again.
Yeah.
So.
I think like being able to do that at speed allowed us to be able to put that text into a variety of different exercises. And because you've got the text on that level, you can go into the exercises and not just like forget, as we did many times. But yeah, so you have the text on this level, and then just break it up and try different things at it, and just see where it goes, to discover new meanings in it.
I think there was a time when I really struggled with my own text, learning it, because there is no punctuation, and then going from that monotone, I just thought, oh God, I hate this. You know, like and I was like, because I was cutting everything away and just trying to be monotone, and then it's just like, now I've discovered, like it's almost like, oh yeah, I see why I do that. That makes a lot of sense, and then they come naturally where you wouldn't necessarily have put them ever, you know. But that's something what I'm still working on in the delivery of it. From the monotone.
I think in a funny way, where if you come to a text and you have any association, one of the first things you're doing is unlearning. If you've had any connection at all, and that can take quite a process. You'll never eliminate it completely, but at the same time, I think if it's a text that stood the test of time, it's probably because there's something that the author themselves in writing has an understanding of tone and nuance and cadence within the language choices, which are naturally going to be implicit in the meaning of the text. And the meaning is only there when it is articulated as diction in the actor's mouth, not as literal meaning on a page. And that therefore, go back to anyone who sort of looks at Shakespeare, as a classic example. There are things within Shakespeare that are there that give you the clues about the rise and fall of the text very naturally because of its structures, which for me is like a piece of music. Yeah. You can play the Beethoven Fifth with no expression, but you still have to do the rise and fall of it. You still have to understand the architecture of it, I suppose. And I think it's like trying to get to the place where you can appreciate the architecture from a neutral point of view, and then you can use it in lots of different recipes. Not to mix all my metaphor. You make a basic dough, then off you go.
We can end it here if you like.
Well, if that's useful for you.
Oh yeah. Me.
That's what's important.
Are there any questions you want to ask of us?
You've got a question there.
I guess, about the scene.
Oh, apart from that.
So we ended up doing it not to the full extent, but I was interested in testing the text also as part of this process. I think I would ask you also, everyone, the relationship with the text, and also for the audience, how did it feel, the repetition of it?
Well, for that, it's fascinating, firstly, just because if you have the repetition of the text in that way and you see it done in two different ways, it just gives you different insights into its potential. So one starts to perceive the complexity of thought behind the text that is possible. And therefore the complexity of the relationships and the dynamic that is seemingly the story that I'm getting from the literal meaning. But it raises lots of nuances in that way, and it stops you going, oh, I've got this sussed as a story. I'm going, oh, there's lots going on here. It's about the complexity of relationships something that's deeply layered and deeply textured. And then my immediate response is, I'm not necessarily one I can trust. You know, we do Hamlet machine. You know, in a funny way, it sort of just got those echoes. You know, you do that scene 5 times, 5 different combos. We'll get something about the potential of human relationships from it. And it's very complex and textured, and sort of marries with the aesthetic that we feel emerging in that interrelationship between voice and body that you're creating here, which is
It was
complex.
really fun working with the text as well, for those reasons that you could sit there and read the text on your own, and each time you'd create your own associations to it, and they changed. The amount of times that I'd sit there and read it and I'd think, oh, I feel like this now, and this is what I feel like, and then that completely changed, and it was something the complete opposite, and I have a completely different attachment and feeling towards the script to the last time I did it, which is really nice to be able to work with a text that sort of allows you to play so much with it.
Yeah.
Is it ever in relation to the last time you did it? It occurred to me that we saw it twice, but only twice. So I wondered whether tonally the second time was a response to the first time. Because they were quite markedly different, and I was thinking, what would it be like if they were quite the same?
And that was actually the underlying question. Did they feel very different?
Yes, they did. But I was thinking I'd like to see it 3, 4, 5 times in order to understand.
Can I just say, because I've got to pick Otis up from school, I just want to say thank you to you all, because I might not get a chance with you six. And also, it's just, Nick and Mike and Mark and Andrew and I often talk about how nice it is to have a chance to do, this feels like a proper discussion. We're doing a lot more practice as research in this department, and we're looking for ways to facilitate, and just thank you for organising it, really. And thank you guys so much for your, not just the demo itself, but the Q&A and the whole kind of way you're engaged. I really appreciate that. And thank you.
And with the fun thing as well, like when you said about laughter in rehearsals, like we are all playing a game together, aren't we? We are all playing a game together, what we all believe. So therefore it is really fun because we're all in that. We're all in the same. No, yeah, we're all in the same world as well. No, we're all in the same world doing it, but we take it really seriously, you know. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Very well.
Thank you.